Senator, certainly, though, there were many, Wall Street Journal editorial board included, who thought that was an opportunity, that hearing, to get more answers, and it instead devolved into what it was. But one of your criticisms of Dr. Fauci is that, in your estimation, he said one thing publicly, where he sort of downplayed the virus, and one thing privately, where he acknowledged, its seriousness. Well, President Trump did the exact same thing, that he told the American people there January, February, March 2020 that this was something that would blow over, while we know, because he had transcripts and audio recordings with his calls with Bob Woodward, the journalist, where he said to Mr. Woodward, this is far more serious. So does President Trump deserve that same level of scrutiny as you want Dr. Fauci to face?
I think the main culpability of Dr. Fauci is that he advocated for a decade before this the funding of these labs. He funded a lab in the Netherlands that mutated the avian flu and made it more dangerous. The whole scientific community, led by a scientist at MIT, set up this Cambridge working group and were very, very critical, said it shouldn't have been funded and it shouldn't have been published. There are people who are nonpartisan. There's a Stanford professor by the name of David Relman who advises government, is very knowledgeable in these affairs, and said that the research in the Netherlands on the avian flu should have never occurred. So he has made mistake after mistake, and the idea or the decision to fund this dangerous research in China, I think, may be one of the worst, if not the worst, medical public health decision in a lifetime.
Well, Senator, along that line, then, in your argument, should everyone involved with this sort of research, this gain of function research, should they all these people face, potential criminal investigation?
I think they should all apologize, and I think they all are culpable in many ways, maybe not legally. For example, the research project from 2018 called DEFUSE, DEFUSE, was to take a coronavirus and insert a furin cleavage site. That is very similar to what COVID looks like. That was to be funded by our government, never was. But when COVID came out and they saw the structure of COVID, they should have said, oh, my goodness, this is just like the research project that we looked at and rejected because it was too dangerous 2 years ago. No one said a word. There's got to be 150 people that were in different meetings that knew about this. Ralph Barrick knew about it. He was a lead investigator. He says he never told Fauci. Fauci says he never received this. They all had to know. But Fauci also knew that he'd been funding the lab. One of the first emails he gets from his assistant in January 2020 is an email that says gain of function research in Wuhan. They were labeling it that way. EcoHealth, that was getting the money from NIH and sending it to Wuhan, they put in one of their letters when their funding started up again, thank you for restarting our gain of function research. They were all calling it that. So the level of dishonesty here is astonishing, but it wasn't a mistake. It was because Fauci had a conflict of interest. His conflict of interest is he knew he funded this, and he knew if it came from the lab that there would be a culpability attached. So he argued for the natural origin, not because he objectively thought so, but it was better for him.
So, Senator, I guess the bigger question a lot of people have as they listen to this debate and this conversation is, are you suggesting something nefarious from Dr. Anthony Fauci? There were things that made a lot of us mad, and in hindsight make us even more mad, that schools were closed too long, that 6 feet apart may have been some kind of arbitrary number, that little kids didn't need to wear 2 masks to go to the playground. But all of that is after the fact, in the fog of war. Are you suggesting that Dr. Fauci made mistakes, which I'm sure he would concede he did, or that there's something nefarious behind his actions?
I would say it's wrong-headed. I'm not sure I would use the words nefarious. I would say that he is of the belief that the common man can't handle the truth, and that people like him, who are the science, the elite, and the experts, should make decisions. So many of his decisions about masks, he originally said you didn't need to wear them, which is probably the bulk of the truth from most of the studies. Cochrane Analysis looked at 78 different studies in a meta-study, and that's what their conclusion was. But when he told us that, he also then explained why he said masks don't work. So there was a shortage. And I was just telling people that because it was a practical way of saving them for the doctors. So he was telling us noble lies, platonic lies, because he's one of the philosopher kings. So it really is about an attitude, but it is an arrogance, and it is an arrogance that shouldn't go unchallenged.
Certainly, though, there are many who feel Dr. Fauci devoted decades of his life to public service and public health.